and welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guest this evening is Sandy Maniscalco from the Terri Brodeur Breast Cancer Foundation. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. So for those of my viewers and listeners that don't know about the Terri Brodeur Breast Cancer Foundation, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the organization and what you guys do exactly.
Okay, so I'm actually one of the co-founders.
Okay.
And the foundation really began in 2005 as an idea. And my other co-founder was Norma Logan.
Okay.
And we had done a couple of national events to raise money for breast cancer research. And when Norma investigated the financials, we discovered the 2 years that we participated that 40% of what we raised actually went to overhead. And in that 2-year period, we had raised $200,000. So Norma kind of made the decision that we're going to strike out on our own.
Exactly.
It took several months to get up and running.
Right.
We actually had our official kickoff on February 4th, 2006.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Norma passed away in April of 2006. At that point, when we were starting the foundation, she was stage 4 breast cancer. So we were formed on the idea that it didn't matter what we raised, but 100% of donation dollars would always go to breast cancer research.
Right.
And the way we do that is that we ask sponsors to help us underwrite expense, and we use a lot of volunteers to run the organization. So, and that's what we have been doing since February 2006. This year, we're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary marathon, and that's going to be on October 3rd.
And how's the event planning going so far?
It's going good. We're on track from last year and the previous year, so it's going very well.
Good. And can you tell us a little bit about the event this year and where it is and maybe some details?
Absolutely. So we always begin with a full marathon at Saybrook Point.
Okay.
And then at 10 o'clock, a half marathon begins on Capitol Drive in East Lyme.
All right.
And at 1 o'clock, a quarter marathon, which this year we're calling a super quarter because it's actually 7 miles, begins at the Baptist Church on Main Street in Niantic. And everyone makes their way to the closing ceremonies, which this year will be held at the Eugene O'Neill Theater in Waterford. And I think that the event we've used that format for probably the last 5 years. And the idea of starting the events at different times is that everyone comes through the finish line at the same time over a period of time. So it's more exciting to actually finish the quarter with people who have done the full marathon or the half marathon. It's quite festive. The closing ceremonies are probably the highlight of the day.
Now, for people that start the marathon, the people that start the different versions of the marathon, typically how long does it take them to finish everything?
Well, typically for the full marathon, hopefully people have trained, it can take anywhere from 6.5 to 8 hours.
Okay.
And what happens is, usually we schedule closing ceremonies for 3:45.
Okay.
We give people opportunities along the way if they're struggling and keeping up to sweep them along a bit so that they can catch up. And but we never leave anyone behind.
No, of course not.
Sometimes we start closing ceremonies and we actually still have people on the road.
Really?
One of the things that we do is we have a volunteer who always is designated as the caboose. And the responsibility of that person is always to stay with the walkers at the back of the pack.
Yeah.
And if someone is working really hard to finish and isn't going to make it in 8 hours, then generally that caboose will stay with them and support them until they finish their event.
Very nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
Very nice.
This year, the caboose is, for the second year, a volunteer by the name of Lisa Brodeur. So she's very much looking forward to doing that again, because it's actually, for a couple of years, I assisted another person who was the caboose and being at the back of the pack.
Now, I'm assuming you have opening ceremonies the morning of?
Yes.
Now, what would opening ceremonies consist of?
Well, generally, it's music, it's a warm-up, And we have some speakers to sort of motivate the walkers. And typically, it's 2 of Terri Brodeur's children who speak at opening ceremonies.
Okay.
They take turns. There are 3 children, Ashley, Melanie, and Sean. And every year, 2 of them end up on the podium to speak.
Okay.
And then after the physical fitness, then it's feet on the street. And we really work hard to get everyone started right at 7 o'clock.
Okay. So if it takes you 4 or 5 hours, you're done.
Walking, it takes more than 4 or 5 hours.
Does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's a stretch. And I think that one of the things that we do for the walkers is we provide pit stops along the way. So
sure.
they can stop, they can use the portable toilets,
Yep.
they can grab some hydration, some snacks, drop off clothing if they want. So every 3 miles, there's a pit stop that is there to support all the walkers.
Okay. And as far as, tell us a little bit about the volunteer base and how important in your mind it is to have volunteers with your organization.
Well, without volunteers
Right.
and with our commitment to donate 100% to breast cancer research, we couldn't run the foundation.
Exactly.
We have actually 2 types of volunteers. We have volunteers who sponsor us year-round or support us year-round. They either have a role or they come in just to help in the office. We have a completely volunteer board of directors.
All right.
Our scientific advisory committee is volunteer. And we have a group of people that actually represent the walk leadership.
Okay.
So these team captains and the walk chairs begin planning the marathon for the year back in April.
Oh boy.
And so they meet monthly and they do all the planning in advance. On walk day, we generally have about 200 people that sign up to be volunteers.
Wow.
Yes.
Are you still looking for volunteers?
We certainly are.
All right.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say, I think there's a website that we can send people to and an email address.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think the first stop and probably the quickest way to get registered is to go to the website.
Okay.
And the website is www.tbbcf.org.
Okay.
And we have a new refreshed website, pretty
right.
easy. Just scroll down, find the register to walk or register to volunteer.
All right.
And you're taken through a very straightforward form that will get you registered pretty quickly.
And if people want to email for more information, where can they email to?
Our email address is info@tbbcf.org.
And what types of information can people find on the website?
Well, there's a section about the foundation, talks about how we're organized, our leadership,
All right.
has our finances from last year, our annual report. There's a whole section on the walk where a walker's guide is available. There's a FAQ. There's links to photos from past walks. Pretty much any questions that people have about the walk. That section contains about 8 or 9 pages.
Okay.
We have a page that really tells the story about our researchers and our research program. And we have a sponsorship page for companies that might be interested in sponsoring us. The sponsor criteria is listed, and each year we always list the sponsors for that current year.
Okay.
And the sponsors, in addition, depending at what tier they're at, but all of the sponsors, there's a link behind their logo or their name that will take visitors to the website of that sponsor company.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of sponsors, do we have sponsors already lined up for this year's event?
We do, and we have a group of sponsors that have supported us for the last 9 events and have come, they're back on board this year, so yes.
And who are some of those sponsors?
Well, I think our top tier sponsors include Channel 3, the New London Day, Lawrence Memorial Hospital,
All right.
Full Power Radio, a company called Explore. They do all of our opening, closing ceremonies, staging. Some other sponsors, the Collin Contracting Company, EB.
Yep.
I said L&M Hospital.
Okay.
And Sava Insurance.
Okay.
And we have some individual sponsors.
Okay.
The Chester Kitchings Foundation is a top tier sponsor.
Okay. Now, as far as we just mentioned a second ago when we were talking about sponsors, the research research program. Can we maybe talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think that in the past we've told the story every January about the individuals who have been selected by the Scientific Advisory Committee to receive grants for that given year. At the beginning of this year, one of our Scientific Advisory Committee members, John LaMattina, said, wouldn't it be good for us to really take a step back and try to put the spotlight on the research that we've sponsored and some of these young researchers who have been awarded grants through the foundation. And so we did that. We produced some documentation to post up on the website, including a list of abstracts of published works that were responsible through funding from the Terri Brodeur Breast Cancer Foundation. And in the words of the Scientific Advisory Committee, if you go up and look at the listing of publications there, these publications are listed in some pretty prestigious journals, and so we're quite proud of that. And another thing we did this year, we decided that we really wanted to take an up-close look at the organizations that we support. As you may or you may not know, generally our research is directed to large organizations in the Northeast. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Yale, to name a few. And so this year we actually went out, board members and scientific advisory committee members went out and visited these institutions and actually got to spend some time talking with more recent researchers who are still there involved in their research. And the other thing that we decided to do this year was to host a symposium so that people in our community, our sponsors, our donors, would have an opportunity to come and actually meet some young researchers in person and hear a layman's version of their research, because there's really two ways to talk about it.
Exactly.
In their terminology or in layman's terminology, so that we can all understand it. So we do have a symposium sponsored for September 17th, and we are doing it with Lawrence Memorial Cancer Center.
I was going to say, for those of our viewers and listeners that don't know, what is a symposium?
A symposium is really a lecture series, and this lecture series will be very short because we have a short period of time. And each of the researchers will we've selected three, or we've invited three to participate in the symposium. So they will get up and give a PowerPoint presentation and speak to the crowd. And the whole presentation process will take about an hour. So these presentations will be pretty short. It's mainly to give people from the community an opportunity to meet with them before their presentations, and then also to meet with them and board members and scientific advisory committee members after the presentation. So it's really our first introduction into the community outside of the walk. So we're pretty excited about that.
Would you mind sticking around for another segment?
I would.
We'll be right back.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. Sitting here with Sandy Maniscalco from the Terri Brodeur Breast Cancer Foundation. Welcome back.
Thank you.
No problem. So before we went to the break, we started talking about the symposium that's coming up. I was wondering if we can start this segment maybe with a little bit about what a symposium is, when it is, and maybe a little bit about each of the, I don't know if I want to use the word panelists or speakers that you're going to have.
Well, I I think without copy in front of me, yes, I can do that.
Okay, good.
But without copy in front of me, I doubt that I could specifically tell you the title of their proposals.
That's okay.
But, so, as I mentioned earlier, Symposium is really a lecture series generally. And we have been working with Lawrence and Memorial Hospitals, and in particular the Cancer Center, to try to plan something. And so the two organizations are hosting this symposium on September 17th. And our invited guests are researchers from recent years. So from 2014, we have two of our research recipients. One is David Page. He's an MD.
Okay.
He was at Memorial Sloan Kettering until this summer when he moved to Providence, Portland. It's a research center out in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
And the exciting thing about David's research focuses on immunotherapy, but he is in the process of running a phase 1 study. Now, a phase 1 study is when medication actually is tested in humans.
Okay.
I worked at a pharmaceutical company for years, so that I'm kind of comfortable saying.
Okay. There you go. All right.
So David actually is still working in conjunction with Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they will be recruiting patients for his study from both coasts.
Okay.
The other 2014 recipient that is participating in the symposium is Dr. Erin Hofstadter, and she's an MD also. She's an oncologist at Smilow Cancer Center. And her research goes in a different direction.
Okay.
She's really looking for ways that we can prevent breast cancer from happening or totally getting out of control. And so she's really focusing on prevention and the causes for breast cancer and looking at breast cancer patients and then patients that don't have breast cancer. And if I say any more than that, it would be totally inaccurate.
All right.
Now, the third participant is from this year's group of researchers who were selected.
Sure.
Her name is Natalia Pavlova, and she's a PhD, and she is at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And I apologize, I can't remember the title of her research.
That's
or
okay.
exact, but
That's fine.
these three young people are going to be amazing at this symposium because we've met with each of them.
Right.
We actually visited them during the year, and they get you very excited when they talk about what they're doing. We just recently visited Dr. Hofstadter down at Yale. Three of us went down from the foundation, and she talked about her research, and then she and Dr. Page both took us on tours of their laboratory areas.
Really?
And yeah, it's going to be good. I think that the Terri Brodeur sponsor for this is Dr. John LaMattina. John LaMattina, he's retired from Pfizer, and his last assignment at Pfizer, he was the president of global research and development for the company.
Sure.
And the other scientific advisory committee members are located across the country. So they do this in a very, they collaborate virtually.
Okay.
The symposium begins at 5:30.
Okay.
And it begins with just socializing and refreshments, and the speaking program starts at 6, and then when the three speakers are finished, then there's time for Q&A. There's also time for people who are attending the symposium to interact with board members and scientific advisory members.
Very nice.
Dr. John LaMattina is hosting it, but he's also the it's just went totally out of my head. He's the master of ceremonies for the event.
See, all right, sure. Now, is the event open to the public?
It is, but we have a limited amount of space.
Okay.
And in the next few days, we will be publishing a press release talking about the symposium in the local media.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, from the foundation, we will be sending out an invite through Constant Contact to our mailing list.
Okay.
We'll also be posting it on our website, and we are sending out a plasma screen version of the invitation to the hospital and to a couple of other companies that may have interest. But space is limited, and so I would suggest that people who think they might be interested in attending take a look at the invitation, because there is an RSVP.
Okay.
And actually the RSVPs will come to me, and we are hoping we get a great turnout.
Now, where is the event?
It's going to be at the Lawrence Memorial Cancer Center in Waterford.
Okay. And again, time?
From 5:30 to 8 o'clock, and the speaking program begins at 6
Okay. And when?
on September 17th.
Okay. And as far as, let's get back to the foundation for a few minutes. You said that you guys are all volunteer.
We currently have one part-time employee.
Okay.
And until February, we also had a part-time executive director who left the foundation in February. And I think I mentioned earlier that I am one of the co-founders.
Yes, you
and
did.
so I've been a volunteer over since 2005,
Okay.
actually. And I volunteered to step in as the interim executive director. So I'm doing this as a volunteer.
Oh, fine.
But typically, it's 2 part-time positions.
Right.
And currently, there's 1 part-time person. So I think with the year-round folks, if you count the board, the scientific advisory committee, and the people who make commitments for big administrative pieces to help run the organization, we're probably around 30 people.
Now, as far as the scientific board goes, can you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there are 5 members on the board.
Sure.
And they have been working together since the beginning. The incredible thing is there's been no change in the membership of that organization. The really cool thing about all of this is before Norma Logan died,
Okay.
she actually approached people and asked people to serve on the scientific advisory committee, on the board of directors, and as foundation leaders. And the foundation leaders are all the other people who make it happen, like take care of running business. And it's amazing that since we were founded in 2006, 75% of the membership is from that original group. 100% of the scientific advisory committee has been on board the whole time.
Wow.
And so the leader of that group is a PhD by the name of Nick Saccomano.
Okay.
He's out in Oregon. He is a chief scientific officer at Array, which is a company out in Oregon. Other members, there are 2 members from NYU,
All right.
Dr. Susan Logan and Dr. Michael Garabedian. They are located in New York City.
Okay.
And John LaMattina is in Connecticut, and the final member is Dr. Mike Moran, and he's in Boston. He also is in a company where he is the chief scientific officer.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing people.
Pretty impressive group.
Yes,
I would
yes.
say
Yes.
pretty impressive group. Now, before I forget again, let's talk about the event coming up in October, which is one of the
It's our
main
signature event. Yes. Yes.
Let's talk about it again.
Okay, so it's on October 3rd.
Yeah.
It's always the first Saturday in October. It's a full, half, and quarter marathon.
Okay.
The full marathon begins at Saybrook Point with feet on the street at 7 a.m.
All right.
The half marathon begins on Capitol Drive in East Lyme at 10.
Okay.
And the super quarter marathon, which is 7 miles this year, begins at 1 o'clock from the Union Baptist Church in Niantic.
Okay.
And all of these walkers are heading for the Eugene O'Neill Theater, where they will cross the finish line and then participate in closing ceremonies.
I was going to say, we talked about, I know we talked about it during the first segment, let's talk about it again. Opening ceremonies consist of
Well, opening ceremonies are some short a short speaker program, and it's really one of the highlights of the walk because at opening ceremonies, 2 of Terri Brodeur's children are always the speakers,
Okay.
and they knock it out of the park every single time. And they are Ashley, Melanie, and Sean. And typically they talk from the heart and thank people for coming out to support this event. And as I said, they just get people off to a really great start.
Okay. And as far as closing ceremonies consist of what type of program?
Well, closing ceremonies is a party. There's food, and then there's a speaking program.
Okay.
And this year, the keynote speaker is Eric Parker from Channel 3.
Sure.
And usually someone from the Scientific Advisory Committee speaks with, and generally it's Dr. John LaMattina.
Okay.
Our treasurer usually says a few words, and the president of the organization, which I never mentioned in this whole conversation, is Patty Burmall.
I was gonna say,
And
well,
she's one of those volunteers that, you know, we didn't make a change in leadership the past 2 years because we've had some transitions that we're moving through, and she has hung in there with us for 4 years. She's an awesome president, and
Really?
she comes to us. She works in the Hartford area,
Okay.
and she's a HR professional, so
All right.
comes in pretty handy in,
Yeah.
in a nonprofit
I was
organization.
going to say that's a very, very important thing.
Yeah, so it's our offices and then a keynote speaker generally that address the group at the closing ceremonies.
I was going to say we've got a little bit of time left before a thank you event. One more time is when?
It's October 3rd,
Okay.
and it's 3 marathons.
Okay.
Full marathon begins at Saybrook Point at 7.
Yep.
Half marathon begins at Capitol Drive in East Lyme at 10,
Okay.
and a quarter marathon begins at 1 o'clock in Niantic.
And if people want more information, where can they go?
They should go to www.tbbcf.org, or they can email us anytime at info@tbbcf.org.
Sandy Maniscalco from the Terri Brodeur Breast Cancer Foundation. I want to thank you for coming down, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me on your show, Pete. This was fun.
Not a problem. On behalf of Sandy, I'm Pete. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next week.